How do you get better with storytelling and how does this help your personal brand? This is why you want to stay tuned because my guest is going to be answering that question or those two questions and more. Welcome everybody to this episode of Journey of an Entrepreneur, where my guest, who is a personal branding expert with 20 years of experience in digital branding, founder of Night Owls, the award-winning digital agency. He is also the founder of Night Owl Nation, where you learn the art of storytelling. And I've been a part of it for a year. And I'm super excited to have him on. It is Sunny, but before I bring him up, my name is Sri, and I'm a video marketing producer where I love bringing on guests from different industries from all over the world so we can learn from them and grow as well. So without further ado, let me bring up Sun. Hey, Sun.
Hi, Sri.
Hello.
Thank you
We've
for having me.
We've got Gigi. I think this is, if you're not a member, do sign up now. She's letting you know you can sign up. I'll drop those links just now. We've got Doreen and we have Let's Go. Been waiting for this one. I know, me too. So let me just ask the hardest question of all. What do you like to eat?
What do I like to eat?
Yeah.
I like pizza. I love pizza.
What kind of pizza?
Any kind of pizza.
Ooh.
Every time Gigi asks me, like, what do you want, son? I say pizza. But it's like the one thing that she doesn't like. So
Are you the type of person that will get like pineapple and pepperoni and like just go all out?
No. I like pepperoni pizza, like the old pepperonis, like the tiny ones.
Ooh. So if you're listening in on the conversation right now, whether it's the live, the replay, or on the podcast, let us know in the comments, what is your favorite food? Like for me personally, I have been on this kick for Korean food, but I also love Indian food and Italian food. I love cooking, so I'm always wanting to try new stuff so I can like cook it because I have this dream to become a Michelin chef, but we're not here for that. Let, let's get into your story, Son. So, Son, you've been doing this for 20 years, but do you remember a time when you were young and you created something that other people were like, that's pretty cool, and I'll actually pay you. I want it.
I don't know if they say they're gonna pay me, but yeah, I used to make stuff like even when I was like in the first grade, I was making like flyers for my church and things like that. So yeah, I think ever since I was young, I think people have always been like turning to me to make stuff for them. Things like, like graphic design related stuff. Yeah, but I never I guess connected the dots between that and like what I do today.
Uh-oh. So if you don't know what connecting the dots are, and this is what I've learned in the past year, it's taking things that you have in your life or experiences or examples to go with what you're talking about. So I want to talk about connecting the dots. Like, when was the first time that you realized connecting the dots is really helpful, especially when you are trying to convey a message to somebody?
Yeah, honestly, I didn't even realize it until I started teaching it in Night Owl Nation. So, like a lot of the storytelling techniques that we talk about in Night Owl Nation are things that I learned while teaching storytelling in Night Owl Nation. So I didn't even know that I was like doing all of, like, for example, trying to come up with like a 5-second moment, or trying to like connect the dots, or having some like trying to find like an inner transformation, like the old you versus new you, like all those myth, truth, the myth, truth sandwich, all of those things. I guess those were things that I was doing naturally, but I didn't like know that that's what I was doing until we started like teaching it in Night Owl Nation, and then I was like, oh, that this is what I'm doing, something like that.
So I want to say hi to Saima. I want to say hi to KDJ, who is out there in YouTube. So if you don't know, I have a YouTube and we're streaming there. But I find that I didn't even understand how connecting the dots played such a huge role either. And it was even in the small groups that I was like, oh, so this is what it means. But I love that you brought up the fact that when you teach others, you learn more. So what is something that you learned when it came to storytelling? That is it something that you could just learn just by practicing, or is it something that you learned better if you were kind of teaching somebody it?
Yeah, I think when you teach somebody, it forces. First of all, like I think there's many things going on. When you teach someone, it forces you to know that subject inside and out. Like sometimes when I know like just one small thing and I try to teach it, and then people start asking me questions about it, then it exposes me for like the limited knowledge I have around that topic, right? So it forces me to go really learn about that topic. That's number one. But number two, like what for me, what happened was, like for example, like we would do storytelling in the beginning, and I would say here's like a hero's journey. There's before like setup, conflict, and resolution. Boom, would go write your story, and then people would write their story, and they would come back, and I would read them. And then I noticed that the common theme there is that um, people didn't have like the before and after, the old me versus new me, right? Like remember, like I don't know if you remember that time when I started talking about how like you can't like you can't have a hero's journey story unless there's like a old you that did something wrong, and then you have to recognize what you did wrong and then fix it, and that's the new me. Like until you have the old me versus new me, you don't really have a story. And that's kind of what I noticed. A lot of people writing the stories that didn't have that, so I started talking about that. And then like same thing, like when we started doing carousels, I started to see that when it comes to myth true sandwich, a lot of people's myth wasn't a real myth. It was like something that it was like a personal opinion. Like so when I teach something and I see people write their story, or like people applying it, I can kind of start to see, okay, here are the things that they're doing wrong, so I can point it out, and I can uh, create some sort of a process out of that. That makes sense.
No, it makes a lot of sense. But for those who don't understand, okay, you kind of said a bunch of stuff like, okay, so what's a hero? What's not a hero? What's in is there a villain? Is there a victim in this?
Yeah.
What's the
So
difference?
I think in every story there's a hero, victim, and a villain, right? And sometimes though all those three things are actually in the same person. So this is what I think. I think we all start out as a victim, right? Somebody did something to me, or something happened to me, right? You know, like a Lion King, when Simba's dad dies, like something happened to you in your life, or something bad happens to you, and at that point we're a victim, and we can make a choice to become a hero. But the way you do that is by you taking responsibility, right? You have to take the responsibility to fix the thing yourself, rather than like blaming the villain or whatever, right? And a lot of times when the victim doesn't do that, they end up becoming the villain. Do you understand what I mean? Like in that Simba scenario, he just ran away from home, and he was like playing the victim. He's like, like my Uncle Scar and this, blah, blah, blah. But meanwhile, while he's doing that, he's playing the victim. He's basically also becoming a villain because back home, his family is suffering and he's kind of ignoring it. Right.
I'm
So,
like mind blown right now. Like if first though I've heard this many times, but if you're watching this for the first time and hearing it, you're like, I never thought of it in that way.
yeah. And so I think every one of us has those three things in us: victim, villain, and and hero. And I think in some areas of life we might be more of a hero. In other areas in life we might be more of a villain. Like you know what I mean? Like maybe in some relationship I'm like a villain to my partner, right? Or in another, or maybe I'm the victim to my partner. So I think in all relationship we have some of that, and I think what storytelling kind of helps you do is it makes you figure out like, oh, was I being the villain that time, or was I being the more of a victim, or was I being a hero? Right.
I remember when you had us write a story, or it wasn't a story, it was like it's a brain dump. So we just wrote all of these
Hmm.
experiences we had, and then we had to take one experience and write it from different points of view, from the villain, the hero, and the victim. And when I wrote from the villain, I saw a different perspective. I saw something that I had never seen before. And in that case, it was a story about my ex, who is the father of my child. When I wrote down and I said, I'm the only parent, she is all mine.
Hmm.
And when I saw that, I was like, I don't know if that's a bad thing or a good thing, but I was trying to hide this emotion, but it was always there. And so I found it very therapeutic. But I also find that sometimes we don't see things from, we see things differently when we take a step back. And I
Yeah.
love that exercise of seeing the hero, the villain, and the victim. I do want to get to the comments real quick. We have John who says, that's what creating educational content has done for me. I try to teach people something by doing that I learned myself. Clarity through articulation. We have 𝗪𝘅𝘁𝘂𝗁. Basically, it comes down to the brands become the wolf they feed. We've got Emmanuel. We have Daniel Hall. Hello, hello. Okay, so this myth truth sandwich that you talked about earlier. So, could you give a little bit about what is a myth truth sandwich and
Yeah.
why do we need it?
So in my opinion, every story is a myth truth sandwich because um like if you live life, if you're telling a story about some moment that happened in your life, what you're actually telling is the before, what happened before the story, and then the happened during the story, and then what happens afterwards, right? So usually what's happening is, let's say let's say you were in a relationship in high school, and this is the first boyfriend that you've ever had in your life, and you trusted him and you're like in love with him, and you're like, oh, this is the person for me. You're going into the world with some sort of a naive, like, expectation of how the world is, right? That's the old, like, let's say the 15-year-old Shri. No, that's the old you, who's like, oh yeah, like, oh, I'm in love with this my boyfriend, and blah blah blah, all of a sudden. And then let's say you find out that your boyfriend cheated on you and broke up with you. Now that entire expectation has been shattered, right? So you used to look at the world one way. Oh, this is my boyfriend. I love him. He loves me. I can trust him. And then boom, that expectation has been shattered now, right? And that's the story. And during that story, what's happening is now you have to relearn. Like, you used to believe that you can trust this person, but now you know better, right? And then whatever happens as a result of that, that's your story and your lesson. So every story is already like that. There's the old belief that you had. Oh, I can trust anyone unconditionally. And then the truth is, no, that wasn't the truth because of this event, right? And then now you learn this lesson. So a story already is a myth and a truth, right? The myth is I can trust everyone. But the truth is no, yeah, people have to earn your trust or something like let's say something like that, right? So a story can be a myth truth like that, but a lot of times when I make carousels, I actually turn it into a myth truth. And the reason why I do that is because like telling a story or telling a lesson by itself has really no use. For me to really give a great advice, I have to know who I'm speaking to and what is the thing that they're struggling. And the thing that they're struggling with is usually the myth. So for example, like if I see that um somebody's like, oh son, it's let's say somebody comes to me and son like, oh, I've been designing for like a year now, but I'm still struggling. I'm still not good at it and things like that. What should I do? And I look at what they're doing. Let's say this guy is only spending like an hour a week designing. Then I'm gonna be like, well, the myth that you believe is that you can spend an hour a week designing and you can get better, but that's not the truth. Is this right? So we all have to. I do the myth truth sandwich because we have to start from the myth. We have to start with what is the false belief that your audience believes in, and we have to start from that place. And it's also kind of like a relatability thing because I'm letting them know that I know where you are, I know how you feel, and you believe this myth. I understand. Well, I'm about to prove that wrong, and that's the example and the truth. Right? So it's like myth, what you believe in, and I give an example that contradicts that myth, and then I give the truth.
I would love to ask all of you who are on here or listening to the replay, I would love to have you drop in the comments some of your myths that you believed in for a very long time. I'll go first. One of them was I thought I could grow up to be a maroon flower when I was 5, 6 years old. Like that's what you asked me what I wanted to grow up to be. I wanted to be a maroon flower. So we know that this is not possible, but at that age, I totally believe that. And we have here John saying, I love the myth truth sandwich, but I wondered what's the purpose, benefits for it. Can you elaborate on it?
Yeah, everything is a myth truth sandwich. So for example, let's say a client comes to me and the client is like, son, like, why don't you make the logo bigger? Right? So then now I have to explain to him why I don't make the logo bigger, right? So I have to start with the myth, like, hey, you're probably thinking you want me to make the logo bigger because if the logo is bigger, then people can see it more and it's more visible, right? But the truth is, like, when the logo will actually look more visible and it'll stand out more if there's more spacing around it. And I might even show them as an example. Is like, see, like which one looks more visible, this one or this one, right? Well, the truth is, if you want the logo to stand out more, you have to have more spacing. So you see, like I always start with the myth no matter what, because I need to understand what is the thing that they're doing, right? So another thing is this, right? Like this is one I use in real life. So when clients come to me and say, hey, like, is your agency, we're looking at a few agencies and these other agency we're looking at is bigger than yours, right? Then I would say something like, you think that bigger agencies are going to be more dependable and better, right? Because they have more teams or whatever. But the truth is, when you go to these agencies, they're not like this agency of 100 employees, 200 employees. They're not all working on your project. They're working on the project for Apple and Disney, and they're working on they're the best players in that company are working on those projects, and they have B team and C team to handle small projects like yours. So if you really want care and attention on your project, you're better off going with the smaller agency like us, right? So I start with the myth. You probably think bigger agency is better, something like that. Another example is, yeah, I mean, there's a lot, right? Look, the common one I give is like the we think like the myth is, you know, you have to start a business or like around your passion, like do what you're passionate about, like, or you know, follow your dreams or something like that. But then like, you know, like baking, if baking is your passion, like running a business, running a bakery is very different than baking, because running a bakery means you're gonna have to clean up, you have to run payrolls, you have to take out, you know, you gotta deal with the landlord. There's all these other business things that you have to deal with. So, you know, running a bakery is very different from baking. So, you know, so I guess like that's another thing to understand. Like you can't always choose what you love, but you can choose to love everything you do. So I always start with the myth, no matter what it is, and then I gave you those examples to show you that you can use myth truth sandwich for any communication where you're trying to convince someone of something. Like, let's say you're a customer, your audience, or you know, a girl that you're trying to ask out, or a customer that you're trying to sell to. Like they're over here. They believe in this false truth, which is basically a myth. And if they just knew the truth, like they'll be sold, right? They'll be convinced. So our job is bridge that gap using a myth truth sandwich.
This is like a whole workshop right here that we're getting, and I am loving it. We have Diane or Dion. I know that she
Yeah.
said she signed up to be part of Night Owl, which is exciting, but she's saying myth equals someone's expectation based on current perceived understanding beliefs. That is true. But I would like to see what is a myth that you believe in and you know it's not true now. Like, you know, we all know we can't be maroon flowers. Or I thought I one day one of my clients was asking for the phone number to the office. I gave the phone number, but they never called. It's like, for example, you want to get the phone number of maybe a guy or a girl, and once you get it, you never call them. Like, we want the phone number, but
Yeah,
then we don't
exactly.
do anything with it.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe the myth is that getting the phone number is the most important part, but no, the truth is actually calling that number is the most important part.
that's right. Like, you can't, you know, you want the number, but if you're not taking action to call, then it's nothing. And we
A
have
really common one is, you know, a lot of freelancers when they start, they think that providing a lot of service and being like a full service agency where they do everything and they, you know, without a niche is like, if they don't do that, the myth is that if they don't do that, they're going to lose opportunity. Right? If I say I only do web design, what if somebody wants me to do photos? Or what if somebody wants me to do social media? I can do those too, right? Like that. And they think that they're losing out. But the truth is actually, you're not. Like, there's a lot of myth truth in here. People think that when you niche down, that means don't take on any other work other than your niche. But that's not true. You can niche down and you can still take on additional work that's not in that niche. You don't have to turn them down. So there's a lot of myth truth. Like, if you live life paying attention, there's actually a lot of myth that we believe in life that we don't realize. And like, that's another good thing about this exercise is it helps you understand, like, what are the myths that I believe in that's incorrect.
you go around debunking them and you find out, wait, this is not the truth. And that's what I've learned so far by being a night owl. There was a lot of things that I still struggle with, but there's a lot of things that I can tell that I've grown from just being able to say an example, being able to take one example and find another one that go together. Like the one I talked about with the phone number. I was talking to a fellow night owl member and I told it to her. She was like, That was Rosalinda. She was like, "Oh my god." I was like, "I know. If only Son could hear this conversation." But that's the kind of things that you don't realize until you do it, which is something I wanted to share. Like storytelling, I feel is like a just a word that people throw around, but you're not doing it. I feel that, and I've learned it, that storytelling is really when you practice it all the time, whether it's these small little exercises that you know that you've given and it's part of the Night Owl Nation. I've dropped those links there so you guys can see and learn more about it. But we have a question. Are there some questions we can ask ourselves to help us bring our myths to the surface?
um, so the common exercise that we do in Night Owl Nation, like one of them is always like seeing a story and then seeing the other side of that story, right? So for example, remember there was that one person who was talking about how um like she used to get annoyed when she sees like shopping carts in that was not in the parking lot, that wasn't put away, until she had a conversation with her friend who has two kids, and she said, I don't like putting away the shopping cart when I have kids with me, because then I have to leave the kids in the car alone while I go put away the, and that kind of makes sense, right? So a lot of times I think we just need to see the other side of the story. And then like I guess here's a good one, right? Like I remember like when I started interviewing people for like when I became a client, I was always the vendor. One common thing I noticed is that the people were always trying to sell, right? They're constantly selling to me, trying to prove to me how good they are. So I would hire them, right? That was a common thing I noticed that, but in doing so, I also noticed that a lot of them weren't listening to me, like listening to my questions or listening to what I want. Like they're so busy selling themselves that they're not really doing a good job at actually listening. So I realized that like listening is actually the more important skill in selling than talking, right? So that's something that I started to notice when once I was a client. I was always the seller and I was never the client. But once I became a client, I started to notice that, right? And another good example is like a lot of parents say that, right? A lot of parents are like, I didn't understand what my parents were going through until I had kids of my own, right? So, and a lot of business owners are like that too. Like, oh, when they were an employee, they have one set of mind, but then once you start your own business, you see a different side. You kind of see what your old boss was going through, or something like that, right? So just seeing things from the other person's side alone, I think does a lot.
It really does. It gets you, even as you start doing these exercises, I will tell you, I've gotten a little bit better with asking questions and just sitting there and listening, even in my own selling, because I'm like, do I really know everything to be able to put together something? Or if not, then I need to keep asking
Yeah.
questions, which is something that we practice also in Night Owl. We ask questions like, what tell us more about this. This doesn't make sense. You kind of jump from here to there. And those are things that when you think about it, you practice it in your real life, whether it's with your mom or your dad or your significant other, your child. And John is saying 100%, I agree 100%. Sales is 80% listening. So we're about to like wind this down because we're going to jump onto Instagram. But I wanted to ask you, Son, you've worked with Mel Robbins, Jay Shetty, and Gabby Bernstein and Mark Randolph. And like some of us are like, how do we get clients like that? But really, I want to know, how do you keep, because those are big names, but you're so humble. So what's that kind of mindset that helps you say, I can work with these people, but I can also work with Shri over here?
Well, number one, so here's a myth, right? I think one of the myth is like we have to constantly go after big clients and get big clients. But I think actually the truth is this: if anybody owns agency or anybody's a freelancer or any service business, all it really requires is one good client. Like in almost every business that I know, like a business business doesn't grow like this, in my opinion. That's how I think people always draw, like, oh, it's like a hockey stick. It's like it's gonna be slow in the beginning and it's gonna exponentially grow. It's like that, right? Actually, no, it nothing happens, and then usually it's like one or two event that leapfrogs you to the next level, and then you're gonna be stuck there for a while until another event leapfrogs you to another level. So meaning, like, you have to catch a break at somewhere in your journey. Like, you have to catch a couple of breaks. Do you know what I mean? And those are the opportunity moments. And that's why I said one client is all you need, because once you get one good client, like from that point on, getting that caliber of client is easy. Do you know what I mean? Like, for example, if you interview Gary Vee on your podcast, it's gonna be so much easier for you to get better guests, because you can tell other guests, like, we've had Gary Vee on ours. You know what I mean? So a lot of people don't understand this concept of leapfrogging. So, always be looking for those opportunities, because you're just always that. Like, some people say that you're one piece of content away from, the next step. Like, it really is like that. I just feel like your goal should be to find one right client. Like, in terms of the humility, I think that's just something you learn. If you're in business for a long enough time, I noticed that, like, the more longer and successful entrepreneurs that I talk to are some of the most humble people that I meet. And I think that just comes from, when you run a business, in the beginning, you might feel like I can take the world and I'm the king of the world and I can figure out anything. But then you run business long enough, business will step on you and stomp on you a few times, and and then you start to feel it, right? You start to feel the harsh reality of the market, and things like that. Then you become running a business kind of humbles you over time, and that's what happened to me. Like, I had a huge ego, but then running a business, like, kind of slowly, I guess, ate away at my ego.
Well, I can already tell people now. I've had Sun on my show, and the moment that I posted that this live was about to happen, I had many people who reached out. I didn't know they even knew about you on LinkedIn, but they're like, "Oh my God, I follow Sun everywhere." And so many were super excited. And here we have John, my creative director, who's like, impress one person at a time with what you provide, and the people will build up a higher level gradually. And that's true even with guests. Sometimes I never realize, like, they may be having a small following on social media, but then they turn out to be this super millionaire. And I was like, where did you come from? Like, I didn't know this. Or you get Sun and you're just like, this is awesome, because he's worked with some big names, but yet every Sunday he's with us during the week in the stories, just trying to teach us how to do storytelling, how we can be better at what we do. And I do appreciate everything I've learned from him. He doesn't know I'm going to say all this, but I've learned a lot and grown a lot. And I really am so thankful that I joined Night Owl. And, we have a question. Can you say having a business will tame you down, even down if you have a lioness personality?
Yeah, like what I was talking about was in terms of ego, right? Like, I think you can you can be a lioness and not have ego. Actually, I would argue that if you really are a lioness, like, you wouldn't have the ego, right? So yeah, it's kind of like, being humble doesn't mean that you're not aggressive, you know, and being like, and being being confident doesn't mean you're aggressive either, right? So like there as you kind of move up in the world and you start working with certain people, I guess you kind of start to see their habits and how they are and things like that. And usually, like the the top leaders that I see, they're very confident in their decisions, but they don't also over like double down in their things. They don't go like, okay, Bitcoin is gonna be the thing and blah blah blah, and put their ground on the flag, right? They'll say like, oh, let's see what happens or something like that. So yeah, I think you can be aggressive and you can be very proactive and without the ego, and that's the best kind of confidence.
So I hate to cut this short, guys, but we're actually going to take this conversation onto Instagram. So I'm asking you to come and join us. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's joining in on the live, the replay, even on the podcast, because Sun is an amazing guy and I've learned a lot. I know many of you can join Night Owl Nation, or if you're looking for services that he does, reach out to him, connect with him, tell him that you saw him on this podcast live streaming show. And I just want to say thank you again, Sun and all. And until my next live, which is next week with an amazing guest. Bye, everybody.
Bye.